our big focus, the latest statements by the French President Emmanuel Macron on China and Taiwan, suggesting France is not ready to be caught up between a Chinese and US tug of war. He has said, and I quote here, France will not be a vassal for an ally on Taiwan, and it supports the One China policy. Macron has also said that France's position on Taiwan had not changed and that he favored the current status quo in respect to the island. In interviews after meeting President Xi Jinping, Macron had cautioned against being drawn into a crisis over Taiwan driven by an American rhythm and a Chinese overreaction. That brought criticism from some politicians and commentators in Europe and the US, including Donald Trump. Heading out, Taiwan's parliament speaker questioned the French commitment to freedom. Here's how the French president responded to the backlash over his remarks.
France is for the status quo in Taiwan. France supports the One China policy and the search for a peaceful settlement of the situation. This is, moreover, the position of the Europeans, and it is a position which has always been compatible with the role of ally. But it is precisely here that I insist on the importance of strategic autonomy. Being allies does not mean being a vassal. It is not because we are allies and we do things together that we decide to do that we don't have the right to think for ourselves.
Well, China has never renounced the use of force to bring the democratically governed island under its control. Beijing plans to control strategic choke points and deny access to foreign forces. President Xi also said that China must oppose pro-independence activities and interference of external forces. On Monday, China ended 3 days of military drills around Taiwan. After practicing blockades and precision strikes, China has also continued to use grey zone tactics to test Taiwan's response. Grey zone tactics include sending drones, balloons and fishing boats to areas close to Taiwan. Analysts say Macron is seeking to safeguard French interests in the Asia-Pacific. But for more on this, we're joined by Volker Sanzel, former German ambassador to China and Japan and senior distinguished fellow at SWP, a German Institute for International and Security Affairs, joining us from Berlin. Volker Sanzel, thank you very much for talking to us this evening. How do you view Macron's statements on Taiwan that France will not be a vassal for an ally, that it supports status quo? Is Macron increasingly at variance with the rest of Europe and the US?
Partly he is, partly he is not. Let us leave aside why he made these statements in his initial interview on the way back from China, but look at what he said now after returning. There he reaffirmed Europe's position on Taiwan and its One China policy, but he diverged from the European position on their alliance with the United States. A word like a warning of becoming a vassal of the US would not have been said by any other head of state or government in Europe. So there is a divergence. Let me also leave aside why he said so, but look at the fact of the matter. The fact is that he said that, and that does great damage. That does great damage mainly to Europe and Europe's position in the world. With Biden's policy on China, we had reached a transatlantic degree of unity that had been relatively rare over the past years. So that was something that is now being put into question. With the Ukraine crisis, even more so, President Biden achieved transatlantic unity, and beyond that, Europeans united after the United States. So that is also has been a great advantage, a great bonus for us. And that also, by way of that vassal terminology, is put into question. So is it worth doing that for President Macron? He brought back money, 15 billion euros, contracts concluded with China. And he has made statements which put him in a line with Charles de Gaulle, former French president, who also diverged on the common policy, transatlantic policy with the United States. But does it bring him anything back home? I think there's much reason to doubt. His position will not measurably improve. Rather, it will be weakened. So the bottom line, I think, for me is that because of France falling out of line, we have lost one of the most important partners inside the European Union. And that does damage, additional damage, to us Europeans standing together. I see this as a grave risk, and I wonder what France will do to heal the wound.
Right, and of course, Macron is also facing domestic issues. Business certainly is on his mind, but it seems that the US has sought to downplay the comments. The US has said that we are comfortable and confident in the terrific bilateral relationship that we have with France. So obviously, this is a certain amount of embarrassment for the Biden administration that Europe is taking its own position on many issues when it comes to China.
Mind you, it's not Europe, it is France here. And again, I don't want to speculate about the particular reasons that President Macron had to do this right now after meeting 3 hours with President Xi Jinping. But it does damage. It is embarrassing, not because Europe is falling out with the United States, but because France is falling out with the United States. And thus it is an embarrassment for the rest of European countries as well.
Right, Victor Stansel, thank you very much indeed for joining us with your comments there on the French President Macron's latest statements on China and Taiwan.